Did you know that some of the most common peptide brands people buy may actually be the least effective? And did you know that Peptide Bioregulators, one of the most famous groups of peptides known for being able to alter your very DNA, have actually been classified into 3 different versions? And lastly, did you know that there's a group of super peptides called bioaugmentors, which may become the most widespread and overall useful peptides for humankind? We'll be covering all of that and more in this video. But before we get started, I just want to say that it'll contain a lot of history and science about the discovery of peptides, bioregulators, and bioaugmentors. If you enjoy the science and you want to understand peptides at the deepest levels, such as our peptide mastery students aiming to become certified, this will be very important. But if you're simply looking to be shown the peptides we recommend, as well as what we recommend you avoid, you can either get our perfect peptide starter kit or our free book, Peptide Salvation. It includes a bonus list of our top recommendations for best peptide products and best stores to buy from. Links to both of these are in the description. Have you heard the term bioregulator when it comes to peptides? This is a term used by Professor Vladimir Khavinson, the godfather of peptide science, and a personal hero of mine, for peptides he named after himself. In 2021, I dedicated myself to studying all of his research. I was blown away by the fact that he had published over 700 studies on peptides throughout his lifetime, but he had also discovered things no other biogerontologist has: small-chain peptides, which are incredibly powerful. In fact, these may be the most important discovery made by any scientist to date. A lot of his research did not make it into Western journals and required a lot of tenacity, driven by passion to track down and translate. But considering the incredible achievements and their potential for improving and extending human lifespan, I couldn't resist giving it my all. Now, Khavinson didn't consider himself a normal gerontologist. In one interview, he made it clear that he identified as a biogerontologist, which is an important distinction. The key difference is that gerontology includes everything from social structures to elderly care, and biogerontology focuses purely on the biology of aging. It is this higher level of specificity in biological study which has allowed him to dedicate his life exclusively to the study of these important small-chain peptides, thus allowing him to take research on the field of peptides much further than any other gerontologist who may be working on multimodal structures. One of the predictions that Professor Khavinson had was that by the year 2026, peptides would become known as one of the world's greatest discoveries, and in keeping his prediction to be alive, we are committed to disseminating the most scientifically accurate information on peptides in the world today, as well as continuing where Professor Khavinson has left off and to take his work even further. That's why we are now conducting our own research at the Peptide Science Institute and recently did mass spectrometry analysis on all of the Khavinson peptide complexes. What we found was very surprising, as it showed us that not all of these bioregulator products are created equal. In fact, even some of the official bioregulator products endorsed by Khavinson's Institute have been different compared to what we expected. We'll discuss some of this later in the video when we cover the expected size and number of peptides inside these peptide complexes. Additionally, many other so-called peptide bioregulator products may have contents that are very different from what the label claims. This is further added to the mass amounts of confusion and inconsistent results people get with peptides. Our mission here at the Peptide Science Institute, in addition to spreading the incredible life-changing work of Professor Khavinson and increasing standards for scientific accuracy, is to make it easier for people to actually get these life-changing results. As a result, we needed a way to help people make the best purchasing decisions when it comes to peptides. Because of this, we have classified peptide bioregulator products into 3 different versions, which we'll explore as we get deeper into this video. While in his own marketing material he claimed there to be only 21 bioregulators, he was actually only referring to a particular type of bioregulator called cytomaxes. Cytomaxes are peptide complexes, meaning they contain many different peptides together, which are derived from natural sources. However, Khavinson publicly named many other peptides as bioregulators, which were not included in the 21 cytomaxes. After intensive research covering almost everything Khavinson has ever revealed, we can say there are at least 54 Khavinson bioregulator peptides. These include cytomaxes, cytogens, and a hidden class of peptide he never personally revealed publicly, keeping them exclusively for himself and his private clients. As a side note, there used to be even more bioregulators, but some have been phased out and are no longer in production. Now, when it comes to the peptide bioregulator products being sold, it's important to note that not all are made equal. At the Peptide Science Institute, we have determined that many of the bioregulator products being sold, even the official ones, have varying levels of effectiveness. As such, we have classified all of the bioregulator peptide products into 3 different levels based on our criteria. This criterion includes, but is not limited to, the range of active peptide or peptides within the product, the known unknown effectiveness of the individual peptides within the product, or of the combined peptide complex within the product, and the total quantity of peptides within the product. What is a bioregulator peptide? Before we get started, I just want to say be sure to listen to this full video, especially the later parts of it, as this info is extremely important, not only for understanding peptides, but also for understanding all the different peptide products that people are trying to sell you. Additionally, if you endeavor to master peptides and how to use them, such as our peptide mastery students aiming to become certified, this will be even more important for you. The term bioregulator was a term Professor Khavinson used to describe the peptides he named after himself. We will discuss this later, as it will help you to make better purchasing decisions when it comes to deciding on what peptides to buy. Additionally, it's worth noting we've conducted our own mass spectrometry testing on all of Khavinson's official Cytomax bioregulator capsules. These are the ones manufactured by Garmonia, and we found them to contain anywhere from 7 peptides on the low end to 38 peptides on the high end. We have also conducted mass spectrometry testing on a variety of other peptide products, and we've determined some others, which we've classified as version 2 and version 3 due to their expanded and evolved nature, have considerably more active peptides than the typical official bioregulator products being sold. As such, the official bioregulator peptide products are only classified as version 1, with version 2 and version 3 bioregulator peptide products achieving a higher classification. Here I'll show you an example of our analysis of 2 Cytomax bioregulator peptides. Here is an example of endolutin, which contains 7 peptides, and here's an example of Vladinex, which contains 38. This analysis was done specifically on the peptide products manufactured by Garmonia, which are marketed as the official Khavinson's bioregulators for consumer use as food supplements. But the reality is, while these are the original publicly available peptide bioregulator Cytomaxes created by Professor Khavinson, and they're being widely sold across the world, we have discovered that these original versions are often severely limited. In fact, after experiencing and testing a variety of different peptide products, we classify these original peptide bioregulator products as only being version 1. There are higher levels of these peptide products which we classify as version 2, and even a group of hidden peptide bioregulators that Khavinson himself kept secret from the public, which we classify as version 3. While we won't cover version 3 peptide bioregulator products in depth in this video, just know that they are the most powerful and potent peptide products I have ever come across. Khavinson never mentioned them in public and kept them exclusively for himself and his private clients, but I cover them in depth in our flagship program Peptide Mastery, which will show you how to master the use of all peptides to completely heal, enhance, and transform lives beyond anything else you've ever seen. For now, let's cover some of the version 2 peptide products, as they are also extremely powerful and have their own unique benefits. In many ways, the version 2 peptide products I talk about are an evolved version of Khavinson's original bioregulators. A perfect example is a line of products from a company we recommend called VitaStream. We can confirm they truly are an evolved version which go beyond the original version 1 products because we purchased all of them and then sent them to our lab for mass spectrometry testing, just like we did with all of the original Khavinson peptide Cytomaxes. Then we compared the results side by side, and what we discovered was shocking. Vitapeptides, which are created based on the same peptide organ extraction process as Khavinson's bioregulator Cytomaxes, contain far more unique peptides in their composition, as well as a higher quantity of some of the same peptides. They give you 50% more active peptides per capsule, 15 milligrams per capsule versus 10 milligrams per capsule in the original Khavinson Cytomaxes. And both our lab testing and the anecdotes we have received from test groups have confirmed that they are indeed stronger than the original Khavinson Cytomaxes. This is why we now refer to the original bioregulator products being sold as version 1, and peptide products such as the Vitapeptides line as version 2. But I don't want you to just take my word for it, and I would rather show you some of the differences between the version 1 and version 2 products. Here is a thymus peptide example. You can see Vladinex as version 1 right here, and then Thymosol as version 2 from VitaStream right here, and then Thymolin, which is actually version 3, RX, right here. With each version increase, you can see that there's a considerably higher amount of peptides, including unique peptides. Note that not all of the individual peptides contained within the peptide complexes, whether version 1, version 2, or version 3, have been studied, or even have any data on them in the entirety of the literature. However, some of them do, and Professor Khavinson went on to create a class of these peptides which he called cytogens, single isolated peptides that individually demonstrated significant positive effects. In the case of cytogens, they are synthetically produced replicas of these single peptides, which are ultimately derived from the peptide complexes. For instance, the version 3 peptide products, the most powerful and potent peptide products available, are referred to as RX, since they are typically only available through a prescription in Russia. As a side note, we have found high-quality sources for them which we provide in Peptide Mastery. Interestingly, it was the version 3 peptide products which were created first, before any of the others. The very first version 3 peptide product was actually the pineal gland peptide extract known as epithalamin. It was from this original complex that epitalin, a single tetrapeptide, was found and isolated, later getting classified as a cytogen. In some cases, these cytogens are found in Cytomax bioregulators. For example, we found epitalin inside the Cytomax bioregulator endolutin. We also found epitalin inside endocrine, by the way, a completely new peptide extract from the pituitary gland. This is important to understand because many so-called experts still claim these peptides are entirely tissue-specific. This is simply incorrect, and I recommend you check out our video on this. It's also worth noting that these powerful individual peptides, cytogens, are not always found within the bioregulator peptide products being sold to you. The bioregulator products you can typically buy are either version 1, these are the most commonly sold products, or if you know where to get them, version 2. But if you want the most powerful peptides which contain all of the most powerful cytogens, you must get the version 3 peptide products. While all versions of these peptide products are useful and can be life-changing, to be sure you are getting the full spectrum, you should be using the version 3s which we cover in Peptide Mastery. However, these are specifically for people who either want the best, most powerful results, or people who are truly seeking mastery of peptides and human biology. How Professor Khavinson determined which peptides in particular were the most beneficial ones to produce is somewhat of a mystery, as the published literature was only on the peptides which made it to the market as cytogens. Clearly, further testing was done on a myriad of peptides from each peptide complex sample, dating all the way back to epithalamin, the pineal gland peptide extract, having epitalin isolated from it in particular, when the other peptides it contained were not brought to market. One thing that all of the bioregulator peptides have in common is either them being a natural complex, such as the version 1, version 2, and version 3s are, but which are also claimed by Professor Khavinson to be able to modify gene expression either up or down to bring it to an optimal state within the body, an effect that has never been proven to be observed in a broad sense, as the entirety of the gene transcription profile for each individual peptide in each individual complex has simply never been documented before. The most studied effects have been from the cytogens, or single peptides isolated from one of the complexes, in which each has had a few to several genes looked at under a few to several contexts, but even the genes they influence have not been mapped out in their entirety. This is not intended to take away from Professor Khavinson's work, as it is the most comprehensive work I have ever seen from any scientist on the planet, but I believe this is a result of the extraordinary costs involved in undertaking this research. Even contracting the utilization of different laboratories, testing equipment, and harnessing some of the most expensive supercomputers in the world at the time, such as the Polytechnic's Tornado, which they utilized 560 cores from, to help determine these findings was a significant task. By the way, Peptide Mastery is getting an update later this year which will include all of the known gene transcription profiles of every peptide, all mapped out nice and neat in a chart. There has been published data showing that certain cytomaxes can improve measurable outcomes in the right direction in one case, but have not been proven if they can improve measurable outcomes in the opposite case from that. Interestingly, it has been claimed to be able to do so. If such claims are correct, they are not based on any data known in the literature, but rather through Khavinson's first-hand experiences and unpublished work. A great example to showcase this is the fact that thyreogen can improve hypothyroidism, xenolutin or testolutin can improve female and male hormones, yet thyreogen has never been tested in hyperthyroidism, and xenolutin and testolutin have never been tested in cases where hormone levels were already high to begin with. As far as the cytogens are concerned, the research analyzing them has mostly shown that they are able to turn gene expression up. It has been demonstrated through molecular modeling that Khavinson's cytogen peptides can bind to the promoter region in genes. These are particular regions on particular genes associated with turning on that gene expression. Promoter regions promote and do not silence, hence their naming is promoter. Yet what we have witnessed in some specific cases is the ability for a Khavinson's peptide to still reduce a hyperactive gene expression. An example of this was an H. pylori infection where chonlutin was able to reduce the expression of specific genes that were overactive, or reduce heightened inflammatory cytokines in cases of human monocytic leukemia. Since this could not have been possible through gene promoter binding itself, which to date is the only region in genes witnessed of which Khavinson's peptides bind to, the effect could potentially be explained by the peptide binding to other regulatory regions of DNA, such as within silencer regions, which, like the name suggests, are associated with silencing that gene. Another theory is that since these peptides are shown to interact with histone proteins, whose job it is to wrap the DNA, which contains the genes, into chromatin, the tightness or looseness of such wrapping determines the ability for a gene to express or not. The effects witnessed with gene silencing could be through targeted chromatin tightening. That is, around particular genes which are being expressed too much in particular cases. Ultimately, we do not know exactly how they work, and Professor Khavinson himself did not either, or if he did not publish all of his findings. While we can understand what he meant by the term bioregulator being able to change gene expression profiles in ways that are beneficial regardless of the state they are in, this has at best been determined in specific contexts and not others as mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, no official classification has been given in terms of what specific requirements must be met in order for the peptide to be classified as a bioregulator. Based on the entirety of his materials, including books, research papers, presentations, and interviews, it appears that the ability for a peptide to interact with DNA inside a cell to influence gene expression is a prerequisite as well. However, while this has been proven for a lot of his peptides classified as bioregulators, it has not been proven, at least in the literature, for all of them, especially a lot of the Cytomax peptides, which are entire complexes of peptides. Therefore, it is of our opinion that bioregulator peptides is a loosely defined term with loosely defined criteria. It appears to be something that was determined by Professor Khavinson's own judgment and/or what he witnessed when studying the peptides outside of the literature that he has published. In our Peptide Mastery course, we are going to cover all of the bioregulator peptides, including versions 1, 2, and 3. It's the first course in the world that we know of to cover all of them. Plus, it now covers over 130 peptides in total and is still growing. In fact, we have done so many updates to this course since it has been released that we started a change log with a list of all the changes each time we update, and note down the date of it. That way, if you are a Peptide Mastery owner, you can quickly see what has changed with each time you access it. Another interesting observation with the Khavinson Cytomax complexes, which again are the natural peptide extracts derived from bovine organs, specifically cattle that are under 1 year old, and provided as food supplements in capsule form, is that they are claimed to contain peptides up to 5,000 Daltons molecular weight. Yet our mass spectrometry testing found this to be a bit misleading, as we only detected fractions up to around 1500 Daltons, with rare exceptions, and the vast majority of peptides fell into the 300 to 1000 Daltons range. While we did see some slightly larger fragments in the Vitapeptides version, what we refer to as version 2, the most broad range of peptide fragments exists within the version 3s, which are claimed to contain peptide fragments up to 10,000 Daltons, and according to our testing, this may be true. Unfortunately, our testing equipment had maxed out at testing up to 3,000 Daltons, but we did see fragments right up to that molecular weight in the version 3, as well as a significantly higher number of peptides as mentioned. Again, the version 3 is what we refer to as RX peptides, since they are typically only prescribed by a licensed healthcare practitioner in Russia, and are usually given by the injection route of administration. Although technically, the intranasal route is also a viable option, and one of these peptide complexes has been studied in that fashion, as well as, surprisingly, yet another hidden peptide complex which contains fragments even larger than this. While intranasal delivery is confirmed effective with the one peptide complex up to 10,000 Daltons, and I have personally used it via this route of administration myself with great results, it's possible that some of the larger fragments will not be as well absorbed, since bioavailability generally decreases with the intranasal route as the molecular weight goes up, whereas with injection, you get all of it in circulation. Since these RX versions versions may contain over 100 peptides based on our mass spectrometry testing, as well as have good literature backing. They are best used by those facing a serious health concern before switching over to the other oral capsules, either version 2 or version 1. Also, since some of these version 3 peptides often have long shipping times from the only sources we were able to find for you, which, by the way, are listed in your Peptide Mastery reference and dosing sheet provided as a downloadable PDF and linked in the intro modules of this course, you may want to consider deploying peptides that are more readily available while you wait for these to arrive, if you don't already have them on hand. Finally, I would like to touch on the cytogen peptides further. These consist of just a single peptide which has been isolated from one of the complexes, and some, but not all, are available in capsules. As I discussed in our main introduction modules inside Peptide Mastery, particularly the lesson on the amino acids, not all of the peptides are bioavailable orally, and hence some are provided as nasal sprays. It is important that you do not use any of the peptides which are listed as poorly orally bioavailable in the oral form because you will not get good results. This includes thymogen and epithalin in case you need a reminder. The cytogen peptides are all 2 to 4 amino acids long and have been named after Professor Khavinson. There are 16 of these, and it should be noted that while there are more than 16 single peptides which Professor Khavinson has discovered, for example, thymulin, only the 2 to 4 amino acid ones are classified under the cytogen category. Remember that you can always check your Peptide Mastery reference and dosing sheet to see which are cytogens. Now, in order to discern if a peptide is a cytomax, a cytogen, or an RX version of a cytomax peptide, you can check your Peptide Mastery reference and dosing sheet. This is a sheet which you should reference often, anytime that you are unsure about one of the peptides. There are a lot of peptides being covered here. At the time of making this course, over 130. It's understandable that you won't remember every detail about every one of them. I made the chart so it can be less overwhelming for you. Use it as your guide and reference it frequently. Now that we've thoroughly covered Khavinson's bioregulators, it's time to move on to the next level. In honor of Professor Khavinson, I am proud to introduce a new class of super peptides I'm calling bioaugmentor peptides. So what is a bioaugmentor peptide? These are a classification of elite peptides, which I have determined to be the most broadly powerful for improving one's health, performance, and longevity. They are more likely to have significant, noticeable effects compared to other peptides, where non-bioaugmentors may work in the background or only provide discernible benefits for a particular health problem. While I do believe the bioaugmentor peptides are generally the most beneficial for healthy, typical humans looking for enhancement, it's important to note the limitations of this classification. The peptides classified as bioaugmentors may not necessarily be the best peptide for your specific situation or your clients, if you are a healthcare practitioner, as you must take into account unique biology, biomarkers, epigenetic profile, health predispositions, and health problems you're trying to correct. Just remember that even with peptides as powerful as those we classify as bioaugmentors, the most powerful results will always come from a targeted, precise approach to accurately work with you or your client's unique biology and unique situations to achieve your unique goals. Also, if you have purchased the expansion pack of this course, we will be showing you how you can combine some of the most effective drugs and supplements, even those that are relatively unknown, with peptides in order to get the best possible outcomes. The ability to recognize and understand some of these drugs and supplements as they relate to complex health problems is very important for our certification programs.